All right, and with that, we have a whole other set of episodes to talk about for this season, so let's transition to talking about Chapter 2 of Star Trek Discovery Season 1. Okay. Once more, the major beats of Chapter 2 are as follows. The crew of Discovery realizes that they've arrived in a parallel universe ruled by the Terran Empire instead of the Federation. Stamets is put in a coma by Lorca's misuse of the spore drive, while Tyler is triggered by L'Rell and is revealed to actually be Voq, T'Kuma's disciple, after surgical alteration and mental conditioning. They learn about their counterparts. Burnham is the ruthless former commander of the Shenzhou, apparently killed by a fugitive mirror Lorca. When he goes to figure out what's wrong with him, Dr. Culper discovers some large abnormalities in Tyler's biology, wanting to relieve him of duty. Tyler breaks his neck instead. Discovery is disguised as its Terran counterpart. Burnham, Lorca, and Tyler rendezvous with the Shenzhou, and Burnham assumes command with Tyler as her personal guard. Lorca is placed in an agony booth and tortured. After being ordered to kill all of its leadership, Burnham and Tyler try and reason with the resistance to the Empire. It's led by Sarek and by Voq, and hearing his reflection triggers Tyler and his memories as the Prime version of Voq. This culminates in Tyler attempting to kill Burnham, but she's saved by her Kelpian slave, Mira Saru, and the Shenzhou crew, and has Tyler beamed into space, where he's promptly intercepted by Discovery and locked in brig. Because she didn't kill the Resistance leadership, Burnham is reprimanded by the Emperor, Philippa Georgiou. The Emperor reveals more details about Burnham and Mira Lorca's relationship to Michael, and though initially trying to stay undercover, Burnham reveals to Georgiou that she's from the Prime universe. The new details offered about Lorca make Burnham realize that the Lorca who's been in command of Discovery since she's been aboard is actually indigenous to the Mirror universe. And after breaking out of custody, Lorca sets his followers on the Emperor's ship free and begins his play to take over the Empire to exact his revenge on Georgiou. Meanwhile, Stamets recovers from his coma after being informed about the damage the Empire is doing to the mycelial network by a vision of Dr. Culper. Burnham and Georgiou's team-up proves fruitful, and Discovery coordinates with Burnham to find a way to destroy the Emperor's ship and escape into the network once more. Lorca attempts to recruit Burnham to his side, but is betrayed and ultimately killed by the Emperor. At the last second, Discovery emerges and cripples the Imperial flagship and beams Burnham aboard, who in turn grabs Emperor Georgiou as they all escape the Mirror universe together. When they arrive back in the Prime universe, they discover that they're deposited several months after they were initially displaced, and that the Federation is on the verge of losing the war with the Klingons. Now with access to the ruthlessness of the Terran Emperor, Admiral Cornwell agrees to allow Georgiou to help the Federation bring the Klingons to their knees. To that end, Cornwell has the Emperor assume the identity and rank of Prime Georgiou, and she begins preparing to lead Discovery to Kronos to defeat the Klingons. Georgiou reveals that in her universe, she took advantage of a volatile system of volcanoes, and Georgiou, Burnham, Tyler, and Tilly beam down to the surface. Tilly soon discovers that the volcanoes are active, and that Georgiou intends to make the planet uninhabitable and kill untold numbers of Klingons. Burnham successfully appeals to Cornwell's sense of morality, offers Georgiou freedom, and gives control of Georgiou's weapon to L'Rell, who forces the Houses to cooperate and end the war. The Discovery crew are hailed as heroes, Burnham is pardoned and reinstated into Starfleet, and they all receive commendations. On the way to Vulcan to pick up their new captain, Discovery picks up a Priority 1 distress signal that's revealed to be coming from Captain Christopher Pike aboard the USS Enterprise NCC 1701. Okay. All right, everybody.
You wanna get a drink of water there, Chris?
Yeah, I think so. Excuse me. Oh, okay. Whew. I think I caught I mean, obviously that's a pretty broad stroke that I was operating from, but I think I hit the major beats of everything. So let's start off the Chapter 2 discussion. When you guys think of Chapter 2, what comes to your mind most about how it compares with the first set of episodes, with Chapter 1? Because to me, it's the pretty noticeable, massive shift in tone. Yeah, Chapter 1 was about a war, but we were also exploring locales on a starship in relatively typical Star Trek fashion. Chapter 2, it seems, went really dark and just seems like a pretty big contrast. And I'm not saying that's bad, but I'm just saying that I notice it. So what would you guys characterize as the key differences between the chapters from your own perspectives? Shareef, why don't you start us off?
I mean, really, the biggest difference I see is that Chapter 2 is all I thought about was deception. Like, even though obviously the our Prime Universe folks were, they were deceiving or attempting to deceive the Terran Empire to fulfill their goal and leave, they had to take on these alternative kind of personalities. And I feel like everybody kind of secretly liked, being able to be a little bad, obviously I didn't think that they were down with, the ruthless murder and stuff like that the Terran Empire did. But I think that, especially Tilly, I feel like she kind of enjoyed a little bit, flexing her muscles a bit.
She did get into character pretty easily, right?
Yeah. I think the fact that like Burnham, sort of, I feel like this cloud of deception has always followed her from the beginning, and like, I think that she really, really shows, how like basically how good of a liar she is, which makes, my whole thing is that it's kind of hard for me to root for her as much as I root for other main Trek characters over the years. But you can't fool Michelle Yeoh, because I feel like she knew almost the whole time, to be honest. Yeah. I mean, I really think about like deception as like the main kind of difference, is that even though it was there with Burnham in like a chapter 1, I feel like it's there with like everyone through chapter 2.
Yeah, sure. I can absolutely see that. Rachel, and so now that we're getting into, the regular panel, obviously we have all dissected these episodes probably to death, but we haven't really talked about these sort of larger scale, broader tonal noticings, I guess, between the chapters. So if you had to pick for you, Rachel, what you thought actually set chapter 2 apart from chapter 1, what do you think it would be?
The breakneck speed that everything happens.
Okay.
So I feel like chapter 2 is really telling one narrative racing towards a conclusion. And it didn't set up a lot of stuff to be resolved in future seasons. It didn't really open any new doors. It was just like they knew where they were headed and they were trying to get there as fast as possible. And I didn't like it as much, and that was primarily why. Was I just felt like things were going too fast. Things weren't explored as much as I would like them to be, and you just didn't have as many like cool little moments, or like the little diversions that can be really narratively interesting, like the Pavin planet in the part 1, or the flashbacks with Sarek, or the episode with the time loop.
Right.
Magic to make the sanest man go mad.
Yeah, which I think is up for a Saturn Award? A Hugo Award. Yeah. So that's... But
I just felt like those were little things that weren't like necessarily crucial for the main narrative, but held interest because it was sort of like fleshing out the world in an interesting way. Whereas in the back half of the season, you're just like, this happens and this happens and this happens and this happens, and there's not a lot of...
You got to strap yourself in for the ride.
Yeah, and it was just so like...
But it's like a wooden roller coaster for you, where it's a jerky, and you got
making me a little sick. Yeah.
Fair enough. All right, very good. Now Zaki, we all noticed, I think, on the panel, and I'm sure that Shareef noticed if he's listened to the previous episodes of the show, that you certainly opened up your more critical side through most of chapter 2. But now that things are in hindsight, do you notice as much? Well, no, I'll just take it back to 1, so to speak. What do you think are the biggest differences between the 2 chapters? And how does that reflect, now that we're on the other side of it, in your own personal ranking?
Well, obviously, the biggest difference is, although it was serialized in chapter 1, there was a sense of distinct stories, and then the back half was just, it was the extended Mirror Universe story. So that was the biggest change that I felt. I mean, honestly, my criticisms of the Mirror Universe as a concept, and thus as a storytelling device, still stands. I cringe a little bit every time we go back there. However, now that it's in the rearview mirror, I hope it stays that way. Because I get it. You had your big twist, with Gabriel Lorca. The captain of the ship makes a heel turn. Hey, you know what? Mad props. I like the character, so I was disappointed that they did it. But as a storytelling device, you can't say Star Trek has ever done that before. But okay, sure. I'm ready to move on now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can understand that. That's I mean, I shared your disappointment overall with Mirror Lorca just because he was so fascinating, but
Yeah.
is what it is. And yeah, and you're right, credit where credit is due. It was different. That's for certain, especially in the wider discussion of the franchise. Cicero.
Yes.
Now, when you look at because for the most part, it seemed like you were just along for the ride, and that you were kind of enjoying every new twist and turn that was thrown at you. So, does that hold up when you look back on Chapter 2? And what do you think are the biggest differences between the two?
So, I'm going to answer the second question first. So when I think of Chapter 2, it makes me think of Doc Brown's DeLorean. Okay. Because like the license plate said, it was out of time, baby. So they really pushed everything into a microwave. And I kind of said this, as we were leading into chapter 2, everything was in a microwave, and they nuked the second half of the season. And now that we're kind of separated from it, I take a more zen approach about it. I was definitely along for the ride. And what I realize now is that they weren't necessarily positive that they were going to get a second season for the show going into Chapter 2. So they spent a lot of time setting up a lot of stuff, building a world that viewers would want to return to for a second season and beyond. But in case they didn't get a second season, they did that in Chapter 1. And in case they didn't get a second season, Chapter 2 was there to tie up all of the loose ends for this first season, so that you had at least a cohesive story. Whether you like the resolutions of that story, or if you felt like those resolutions were kind of pushed together and cleaned up a little too neatly for your own personal liking, which is kind of how I felt. But at least there were resolutions, and you weren't left kind of wondering what was going to happen with this crew and what was going to happen with this story or this plot or what have you. So all of that stuff was done in the course of 5 episodes. And so, that's kind of the Zen approach to it. From a non-critical standpoint, and obviously we're here to be critical, but if I can not be critical for a second, man, what a fun popcorn ride those last 5 episodes were. Each and every one of them, or at least the last 3 of those episodes, were all like hour-long movies. Especially the resolution of the whole Mirror episode. When they came back, as we talked about during that episode, in our recap of that episode, the fight scene in the throne room was the greatest fight scene that had ever been seen on any track, across the movies and anything else. Like that episode alone was phenomenal. Like, a lot of good
space-based fights in throne rooms over the last several months. Huh?
Yes, exactly. And the effects were great, and they were able to throw a bunch of stuff together, and so with sans criticism, what a fun ride. But if you include the criticism, it's just like, well, you really made the part. Chapter 1 was very cerebral, and Chapter 2 was very broy. So like, can you put those together and make a cerebro? Am I crossing X-Men territory now? Am I crossing streams? Well, actually, the Star Trek books were Marvel anyway, so yeah, so we can borrow Cerebro.
That's true.
And I enjoyed it. I still enjoyed it all. I was disappointed in the way that it really departed from Chapter 1 in the way that it kind of built the world. But I understand it now stepping away from it and having some time to reflect on it all.
Yeah, sure. I think that's understandable and pretty consistent with where you've been. I mean, how could you not at least admire the ride that they're putting us on? I mean, for everything that we notice in the Star Trek franchise in all of its iterations, Discovery very much did endeavor to do something different, regardless of, some reductive analyses by some fans who try and accuse it of being the same. I don't think that's fair. I think that it very much set out to be a different kind of Star Trek show, and I think that it largely succeeded. Whether or not it was ultimately successful, that's up to personal determinations. But to say it wasn't different, I don't think is fair. But let's step through that looking glass a little bit and talk about the fact that this show went to the mirror universe. So, Shareef, we all have pretty different feelings on how the mirror universe is used in Chapter 2. Zaki was a very vocal critic about it. I tended to find it generally interesting. Cicero was enthralled, and Rachael said she was fine with it. It was just like I think she was just still mad about the war, right? And still not fitting.
Yeah.
Not quite fitting in. But where do you stand? Do you think that it helped or hindered the back half of the season by actually going to that parallel universe?
I like the idea of the parallel universe. I do not like the idea of it being so short. Like, as I felt like with a lot of this Discovery season, I feel like they stuffed too many plot lines that could have been stretched out and nuanced. Like they kind of stuffed them all into one season because they really wanted it to be unpredictable and like, kind of appeal to this new generation of viewers that are used to, like they kind of judge things by not being surprised by them, like Westworld, Game of Thrones kind of era, like post those shows era,
Sure.
So I feel like they really wanted to evoke that and get that kind of fan in there. But the bad side is I feel like the mirror universe is something that could have been looked at over the majority of a season, and they could have really delved into the nuances of like the differences and the similarities of these characters, except making like, mirror universe bad, our universe good, which is kind of how it kind of ended up, and like I feel like that was really a really missed opportunity. I'm the science guy, but to really delve into what it means to have a parallel universe, in terms of like quantum physics and stuff and like relativity. So I really think that they could have really delved into it and really made something awesome. I'm not saying that they need to make Interstellar,
Sure.
but I do think that they could have had sort of like a happy medium that could have both, really dug into some like the ramifications of some known scientific concepts kind of taken to the extreme in like the Trek universe. And like also I feel like they could have used this to really flesh out some of those characters in the background that I feel like didn't really get to talk a lot. I feel like that could have been an opportunity to meet maybe the mirror versions of like those characters are a lot more involved and like assertive. And then like I feel like that could have been a opportunity to bring those other characters into it as well. One of my main criticisms of Discovery is I feel like there's not enough of the crew that we really get to know. I feel like when I think about like Voyager and TNG and that kind of stuff, I feel like I know more about more people on the crew. So like, yeah, in short, I was fine with the mirror universe. I just feel like it was kind of simplified and ran through a little quickly.
Very understandable perspective. Well, same question to the whole panel. Now that we've sort of lived with the idea of these episodes being added to the mirror universe stories in the franchise, and obviously, not a lot of time has passed. It's certainly not as much time as has passed with every other mirror universe episode and every other show where we can precisely quantify what its position is in Star Trek history. But how has the fact that the show has gone there and the way that it ultimately executed its place in the mirror universe, how has that been sitting with you since we are now on the other side of season 1? Cicero?
Yeah, so it makes me, as you were talking about it, it makes me think about shameless plug time. My appearance on Scott McNulty's Random Trek episode, where he talked about, a lot of people think about Discovery as a prequel to TOS, where he thinks about Discovery as a sequel to Enterprise.
Right, I remember him saying that.
And when you think about it that way, and specifically thinking about it that way with respect to the two-parter in Enterprise, or Mirror Darkly two-parter for where they go to the mirror universe, it really makes a lot of sense. And I kind of echo some of Reef's feelings about the mirror universe, much to Zaki's dismay, that I would have loved to see more time spent delving deep into, what makes their universe different from ours and what makes it similar to ours. And I think we got a little bit of that when when I was talking about, Emperor Giorgio versus Prime Giorgio and their similarities with their relationship with their respective Burnhams, that there was enough similarities there where you can see like, oh, okay, there were these small breaks in thought processes that took us the prime way and took them the mirror way, that really made the difference. But I would have loved to see more of that. I think much to Zaki's joy, I don't think we will actually go back unless this show becomes a roaring success and we get 4 or 5 seasons. I don't think we're going to go back to the mirror universe anytime soon. Or we'll go back to the mirror universe at all on Discovery. But I definitely do think it was an opportunity lost to really explore the relativity of it all and the quantum physics of it all, which is a shame. Zaki, don't you agree?
No comment.
We will get to that. I'm just getting ready to flip the switch. You know what I'm talking about too. I'm just getting ready for it. But before that, Rachel, now you are not a Star Trek neophyte. You said that you were fine with the mirror universe stuff. You've seen every mirror universe.
You know what it means when a woman says fine. It's fine.
Amen.
But maybe I don't. I don't know because. But I mean, you've seen every mirror universe episode multiple times.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Except for maybe 1 or 2 of the Deep Space Nine episodes. You know what the conception of this alternate world is supposed to be, and you know where it stands in the cosmology of the Star Trek universe or Star Trek multiverse. So what do you think? Give me your true feelings about the mirror universe in Star Trek Discovery. Do you sort of agree with Shareef? Was this their way to get to the Game of Thrones crowd by, inciting all of this surprise? Were you kind of just okay with going along for the ride, or did you feel something else?
So everyone, he touched my heart when he said, yes. What do you feel? Do you feel in your heart?
I want to know what's in the beating heart, because you have a gift for understatement, and I need to know.
Okay.
Hubson needs to know.
Okay. I just like the thing that comes to mind is it was fine. No, I with some time to digest it and in the context of the larger context of the season, I think I have warmed to the Mirror Universe episodes.
Really?
Yes. So I look back at them with fondness in my heart.
Hey, right.
And I mean, I'm a modern TV viewer. I like solving the show, and so I really liked kind of seeing my little theories come into actuality on the screen. So I liked that, and I thought that was good. It is kind of a missed opportunity to explore some more like hard sci-fi themes, like Reef was talking about. But I kind of get why they didn't do that in the context of the short amount of time that they had. So like my problems are far, far more with the Klingon War and the stuff when they get back from the mirror universe than with the mirror universe itself.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think my only problem with it was it would have been cool if Lorca had maybe a more complex origin story than just, he's evil. But other than that, I think it was good.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. It was fine.
That word again.
Fine.
All right. Zaki, tell me if I need to flip this switch.
No, it was fine, Chris. No. I almost feel like I mean, there's nothing else I can say because I don't want to be like Debbie Downer every time we mention the mirror universe.
Speak your truth.
No, I don't.
Slowly he turns.
Yes, speak your truth.
No. Niagara Falls.
Right.
No, but I don't see your perspective that way. I anybody who's listened to this show, anybody who knows you knows how much this franchise means to you and how much these stories have meant to you throughout your entire life. And that's the only thing that I want to get at because, we were so committed to dissecting each episode as it came out and the broader strokes. Like I know, and everybody who's listened to this show so far knows that you have problems with the very concept of the mirror universe. And I think you put it very well when I think the first time that we spoke about it, you said that's a concept that was designed to work for 50 minutes in the 1960s. And it did. And stretching it beyond that, I know you have some serious misgivings about, but even knowing all of that stuff and understanding what the capabilities and aims are for a modern television series, do you think that if Star Trek wanted to try and get that Game of Thrones crowd that Shareef was talking about, was the mirror universe the wrong place to go to get it? Or do you think they maybe had the right idea?
I mean, I think once you move into the mirror universe, you are sort of divesting yourself of any real attempt to win over a broader audience. I mean, that's inside,
Sure.
So given that, you're like, okay, that's fine. I mean, I'm already inside, so it's not a big deal. But I mean, I said this before. I remember when they did the last two episodes, those two episodes in the last season of Enterprise, and they were in the mirror universe, and so many people were like, oh, it was great, and you got to see all the stuff and whatever. And I remember at the time being like, we are down to just a handful of episodes, and now we are wasting precious runtime with stuff that doesn't directly, it has nothing to do with our universe, right? And with this, I mean, it does have something to do with our universe in that it does involve a crossover, so that's fine. But I mean, I still feel like, my God, did we need this many episodes to do this? Like, it's like writing for the trade, It's like Brian Bendis doing, Ultimate Spider-Man or whatever. I feel like we could have trimmed this. We could have got him back home, and we could have gotten to something resembling a more traditional Trek status quo. So a lot of it feels like padding for the trade paperback, if you will. I was relatively sedate.
I'll give you this. You were, but I mean, I heard the fire though. I heard it lingering just below the surface. Okay, well, let me ask you this though, Zaki, because yes, we didn't. We're out of the mirror universe, and I think Cicero has a very good point when he says this is probably not going to reoccur at some point in the future. However, we do know with relative certainty that the Prime Universe has something or someone that they should probably bring home at some point. Would a story involving the exfil of Gabriel Lorca back home to the Prime Universe justify visiting it again in the future if that's a potential story that they explore.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always ready for the good version of whatever story they're going to tell. And just to be clear, I certainly didn't watch any of this mirror arc and say, oh, what a piece of crap. I was engaged for the most part, so I'm definitely not coming at it from that perspective. And even Emperor Giorgio, like, we know she's farting around somewhere, so realistically, we're gonna see her again. That's fine, like, I get it. These are the stories they're gonna tell. That's fine, but I'd rather not do another extended layover in the mirror universe. I'm with Cicero there, where it's like, all right, we did it. You got it out of your system. You happy now? It's like forcing. You find your kid has like a pack of cigarettes, so you make him smoke the whole pack, which I guess is what parents used to do. It seems like crappy parenting.
We were all crappy parents.
It's like a terrible thing to do to your kid. That was such a common 80s thing.
We're gonna make your lungs even worse, and it's your fault. Well, but on another point too, the host of Random Trek, as Cicero mentioned, had a different conception of Discovery. Instead of as a prequel to the original series, as a sequel to Enterprise. And we've seen some more overt connective tissue with Enterprise. Does that do anything?
He hated the Enterprise episodes too.
Well, no. But I just mean like in concept, as for the show to be a sequel to what we've seen before, as opposed to a prequel to what we know is coming.
Right.
Yeah. I think that anything, you know this because I've said it repeatedly, but anything that ties Enterprise more directly into the canon, as opposed to being like the thing that you wipe off your shoe, I'm always happy to get that. Like, I squeaked a little bit when Admiral Cornwell, mentioned Jonathan Archer, at the tail end of the first half there.
Yeah. Well, and like I've said before, too, I think that Enterprise has managed to work its way into something of Star Trek royalty. Now people are seeing it with a whole new level of appreciation, particularly people who hate this show.
Suck it, haters.
but I mean, particularly people who hate this show, now they're longing for Enterprise, which I find eminently fascinating, but...
Yeah, suck it, you haters, too.
Like, I got another thing to ask you before we open it back up. So one of the things that seem, well, I guess I'll offer my perspective on this before. Mine hasn't really changed much after reflecting on the entire season at large. The mirror universe, I do feel, was worth going to. But I'm kind of, I think, in general agreement with all of you that there are some things that represented missed opportunities, not the least of which being, I guess, a more focused perspective, because we got to see these sort of broader strokes in the mirror universe that dealt with its leadership, and we even got to see the resistance to the Terran Empire, which I think those were my favorite parts of this second part that actually just took place in the mirror universe. But I would have liked to have at least gotten a hint, and I'm a sucker for good guys. I mean, I've got a collection of Superman issues that would make any regular man weep, probably. I'm looking at my mountain of long boxes next to our table here. And I mean, I like good guys. I would have liked to have seen some sort of validation for the Prime Universe vision of Gabriel Lorca. I don't necessarily think that was something that needed to be on a loose thread, but maybe it'll feed a rewarding moment at some point in the future. But overall, I'm okay with the foray into the mirror universe, but that's far from the most engaged I was in this. It was certainly engaging when it happened, but beyond that, I was ready to go home. It's like you spent all weekend at grandma's house, and grandma's great. You love grandma. But your own bed is really comfortable and it's calling back to you.
Yeah, Chris, you keep mentioning this. I mean, I think that there is a greater chance of us going back to the mirror universe than there is a chance for us to see Prime Lorca. I think
you just broke my heart, man.
Look, man, sometimes real love is telling somebody what they need to hear as opposed to what they want to hear. And
Yeah, honestly, I don't. I've noticed you guys in most of your episodes and tonight, you guys seem to be like much more interested in a Prime Lorca than
Really?
I am.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Like
go
I'm
ahead.
fine with not even know. I'm fine with not even knowing about Prime Lorca. Like I am. I'm fine with the character. I feel like the character, of the Mirror Lorca and like his sort of. I feel like I got a good arc from him. Like I feel like it would be cool to see if Prime Lorca is like whatever, some janitor or something like that. But really don't. I'm not as curious, and my love for the mirror idea, I guess, doesn't hinge as much on another Lorca as it does for you guys. That's one
Yeah,
thing
so
I've noticed.
you know
from the
who else
conversation.
is not as interested in you guys knowing about Prime Lorca like Reef is? Jason Isaacs.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, I think Jason Isaacs had his run.
He had us on a string the whole season, though. You don't think that
he absolutely did. But I think he is this was a thing for him, for Jason Isaacs. This was a thing for him, much like Sean Bean, where he could do a show and really be part of a zeitgeist for a moment, and that would allow him to use that momentum to go and get bigger and better projects on screen and on stage and what have you. And this is just a thing he did where he did the right thing, where he left us wanting more, and we won't get any more.
Well,
Now I want Sean
There
Bean
you go.
as the captain.
Sean Bean is the captain.
You'd have to
I'd be
die
down for that.
horribly.
yeah, that's true. He'll get impaled
That's
by
true,
a
just-
batleth through the heart like halfway through his first appearance. Like, well, okay, we got a bean out of this. That's good.
By
Right.
Mary Lorca. Bam. Or by Prime Lorca.
Think you can take my chair? Oh man. Ooh. Well, all right. Well, let's move along a little bit. So, one of the things that seems clear to me now is that the show was basically angling for an opportunity to prove the Federation perspective in the end, even if we all kind of felt that the season finale itself was rushed. Zaki, you said in our finale review episode that you felt the Federation as a concept was partially or maybe completely compromised in order to build Burnham as a character. Do you still feel that way? And also, do you feel that the finale's message of, Federation morality was properly justified by what we saw?
I still feel that way. I mean, I get what they're doing, right? Because the message of perfected humanity is something that's difficult to wrap our brains around. So the idea of the Federation bumping up against its own principles, that's good drama, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I get that, but I think what I said before was, all right, we're gonna do like genocide on these people, and then Burnham's like, hey, don't, and then she's like, okay, yeah, maybe we won't. Like really? And so to me, I totally believe that. But, like, I don't think we needed to do that to make us respect Burnham, because we've done the whole season. We've seen what an admirable character she is, and I feel like, I don't know how. I mean, you know what I mean? I haven't revisited the episode since I saw it, to be honest. So I don't want to dive too deep into that. But anything worth having is worth fighting for, and I feel like this is a period where we're the Enterprise is shooting around space, sort of spreading the message of the Federation, and then they're being the people back in the home office are being so wishy-washy about it. I don't know, that did kind of bump me. It didn't bump me out of it, but it did bump me.
No, I think that's understandable. Well, same question to everyone. Is the message and general ideological victory for the Federation justified by the time the credits roll on the season finale, or did it leave something to be desired? Shareef, this seems like a question tailor-made for you. Like the depth to which the show would end up going with justifying the Federation perspective. Did you find that satisfying or wanting, or did you have a different take on it?
I mean, to me, like, I think I'm not sure exactly what the show was trying to say about the Federation, because to me, the Admiral, like when they decided on genocide, and they decided not doing it, I don't feel like that was some huge 100% change in their fundamental values. I think what it showed is that they could go there if they wanted to, and just because they decided not to go there this time because they realized that they trusted like a mad woman basically in Emperor Jojo, that doesn't mean that they're like, okay, now we're only going to follow, you know, like the Star Trek Geneva Convention basically. I feel like they took this as an opportunistic thing where they felt like, nah, we're not going to do that this time because it would look really bad,
Sure.
you know? So I don't feel like there was sort of a victory of Federation, you know, of the typical Federation thought process that like we would think about, you know. I think that this was basically saying like, hey, you better have somebody like Burnham on your team because otherwise, like the Federation is going to get dirty, you know. Yeah, so like that's kind of what I took from it. I'm not sure if that was the intention of the show. But after, you know, like I watched the last few episodes a couple times, and like I kind of felt that each time that like I watched it was like, you know, I kind of didn't feel this rousing like yay Federation by the time I finished the series.
Did it worry you a little bit? Like there's sort of an ideological precariousness that they're operating off of.
Well, it honestly opened me up to some interesting concepts of having a Star Trek season where it's literally, you know, a few people fighting against, you know, Big Brother Federation government. But then that was kind of ruined by the last shot of the season. I was like, oh, well, that's not going to happen now that they're introducing this angle. So, you know, so like, I don't think it's going to happen. But I don't know. I was not left super optimistic about the Federation after the show.
Maybe that'll lead to a sort of opening that can be exploited by a certain clandestine organization that doesn't really have any compunction about serving larger morality, right? Who knows?
Absolutely, especially if they got JoJo.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man, that's a nightmare waiting to happen. Cicero, what do you think about this?
So I felt like it left me wanting the way it, again, it was just the way that it was handled was so kind of hackneyed, and you know, I felt like somebody's 7-year-old got to finish the season, and you know, again, so I kind of talked about it when we were talking about Tyler reintegrating himself back onto Discovery, and that scene in the mess hall with Tilly and everybody else where it was that Saved by the Bell moment. There was a lot of that again with the resolutions to everything. So with L'Rell and the Klingons, like with Earth in its sight, like you could see Cleveland from the Birds of Prey, and then they decided to fly away. I don't know why I picked Cleveland, but but they flew away at the last moment, right before they were about to Death Star Tatooine or whatever, and it was just a weird thing. And then the ease with which, and I get that it was desperate times, but the ease with which the command of the Federation was willing to forgo their principles and commit genocide was just it just didn't seem right. It didn't sit right with me. And again, it's like were it not for Michael Burnham and the rest of the crew of Discovery, we would be in the mirror universe. We were just this close to becoming Terrans ourselves. And that just seems weird to me. It just doesn't sit well with me. But again, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that they wanted to make sure that they had an opportunity to finish these stories before, if they never got a season 2, and also where they were like, oh crap, we've only got 5 episodes to finish all of these stories that we started in the first 8 episodes, or first 10 episodes actually. What are we going to do? We've got 7 hours or 8 hours of stories to tell and only 5 hours to do them in. What do we cut out? And that's,
Right.
And that's what we got in the second half of the season. And because of that, we have these conversations.
Sure. Yep. Again, another understandable perspective. Rachel, what do you think about this whole concept of, I mean, it seemed like they were trying to push forward the idea of Federation ideals winning out, but obviously there's some split on the perspective on that.
Yeah,
What do you
I think the speed at which it happened compromised what they were trying to do with the narrative.
You're so much better than
Like it's just you don't feel it. Like they show you like, oh no, that Klingons are close to Earth. They could see Cleveland as
By the way, Cleveland is probably where the Klingon consulate is
Right
going to
on.
be by the
Yes.
24th century. That's probably why he picked Cleveland.
Yeah, so I just we're supposed to be like, oh no, well, and then they let us connect those dots ourselves and be like, oh, they must be really desperate, that's why they're doing it. And it's like, no, that's not how you tell a story. Like, make me feel it, make me feel the desperation, and make me feel why it's important to do the right thing even when you feel desperate. Like, I think that's what they were going for, but I didn't.
Well,
They kind of beat you over the head with it.
Well, not they just let me connect those dots myself. And so then I don't even, I'm not sure if that's what they meant to be saying. It's just, it was just sort of like, oh, this happened, now we're going to commit genocide. You shouldn't do that. That's not right.
Right.
You're right. It's not right. Good job. Yeah. Federation. So yeah, I think more emotional weight, and you need more time to do that. So
Okay.
that was the problem.
Fair enough. Yeah, and I think I'm in general agreement with you. I mean, it just doesn't seem like there was enough service given for the feeling. That's the thing. I guess it's just kind of a hard thing for good storytellers to actually, or maybe it's mediocre storytellers, but there's a lot of lip service. Like, they think that feeling can be completely generated through writing and through dialogue, and that's just not the case. The immediate example that comes to mind for me in this show, probably the part in the show where my heart was pounding the most, was in the turbo lift on the Shenzhou, where Burnham had to basically murder someone who was going to murder her, someone that she had known in the Prime universe. She basically had to watch die again, but this time, as a recognizable face dying at her hand. And Sonequa Martin Green just owned that scene so well, because you saw this devastating anguish in her eyes, the tears almost ready to run down her face, but she can't afford to cry, because when the turbolift doors open, there's a crew who expects a monster of a captain and leader. And so she just turned the Vulcan on, I guess. Michael turned her inner Vulcan on and basically just went with it. And there wasn't really a lot of dialogue to support that scene, but I just felt it. And I mean, the example about dialogue versus actual emotional involvement that I always bring up is Man of Steel, because Man of Steel as a Superman movie, there was a ton of lip service given to the idea of hope. There wasn't a lot of emotion of hope to be found in that movie. And it's just one example of dialogue not exactly, being able to substitute what it means for true emotional connection. But that kind of feeds into the next thing that I wanted to talk to all of you guys about, because one thing that we've all discussed to varying degrees about Star Trek's general success over the past 50 years has been its ability to be of its time, at least in the best cases. Coming to talk to us about relevant societal topics at the right moments of contemporary times, and at the right moments in history. Do you guys think that Discovery is following in that tradition, and do you think it's succeeding or failing? Because the thing that immediately comes to my mind when it comes to this is when Mirror Lorca is making his speech about what was lost in the Terran Empire under the leadership of Georgiou, there was this nationalistic, human supremacist attitude that did not necessarily feel out of place when put in its proper context in our world today. That was particularly chilling, but even if that's not necessarily what I would have wanted to hear, I can't deny its relevance. So do you guys think that Discovery is following in that tradition of trying to stay current, to be of its time, to tell a story that connects with people, or is it not managing to meet that rather lofty goal? Zaki, what do you think?
I think it is. I mean, it's. I think this is the genius of the Star Trek concept in general, is that it's so elastic. I think really, notwithstanding, some of our nitpicks about how it's handled, what the Federation represents, I think what I think the show does very well is show why the Star Trek future is something worth aspiring towards, even now, even in a moment like right now, where it feels in many ways further away than ever.
Yeah, sure. Very well said. Shareef, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, I kind of have that opinion that I don't know if it was saying that the Federation ideal is what we normally think it is.
Right.
But I do think that this show was definitely of its time, and I think that's why, hopefully it, will be seen as a success. Because, I think that part of it, and this is kind of a pro and the con of the show, is sort of like the pacing. I feel like a lot of shows right now are paced very fast. So I think that that's why they had that pressure to kind of fit like a lot of different plot lines in there. I also think that even though Star Trek has always been a show about diversity, I don't think that they had a lot of roles as diverse as they have in this show. So I feel like that Star Trek, obviously, with like one of the first interracial kisses and that kind of stuff, has always had a lot of major moments, but it's still been, a lot of white people.
Yeah.
And I feel like that, like Discovery really did try, with Tyler and Joe and like Burnham, that they really did try to make a lot of their main characters that you connect with, not fitting the same stereotype. And I was surprised that I thought that there were, I guess, gay relationships before on Star Trek. I was trying to think of it, but like I was surprised when I was reading that, that like the relationship that was portrayed was one of the first, well, I think the first on a mainline Star Trek series.
Yeah. I mean, the first out and out one. The only other time, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but the only other one that comes to mind is the relationship between Dax and her previous significant other at another host, because they were husband and wife.
Yeah.
But then at that point in time, both of their hosts were female. So they just sort of reconnect. Right. So it was kind of a, I don't want to say backhanded way of getting to a same-sex relationship, but it wasn't as, it certainly wasn't as pure as Stamets and Culber.
Right. Yeah. And so, I think from that perspective, I mean, like, I know that was one thing that had me interested up front. Obviously, I was already a fan of like Sonequa from The Walking Dead, but I think even if I wasn't, that initially when I saw the casting, I was like, "Whoa!" Like this, they're really making that effort. So like I think that like that's like another kind of justification of it being of its time and like really hitting on those societal topics. And I do think that even though most Star Trek series do deal with some kind of like totalitarianism, which I always mispronounce. I think that, obviously given sort of like the times we're in, I think that it does ring a little harder when you're reading like the news the day after you're, watching Discovery. So yeah, I mean, I think that, like, once again, I think that they are succeeding in that tradition.
Mm-hmm. Very well said. Cicero, what do you think?
Yeah, I think culturally, this show is of its time on so many levels, in much the same ways that you described, Chris, much the same ways that you described, Reef. I mean, the show starts passing the Bechdel test. Like, that's how it opens.
Right.
With a woman of Chinese descent, and a, Black American woman standing there and talking to each other. I mean, it's just that's amazing. Just off the jump. But then it gets even better when it comes to, really, really celebrating diversity, from not only the first gay characters, but it's like a gay interracial couple, on top of that, and not some cheating interspecies thing or something like that. This was two human males, who loved each other and wasn't made to be weird. Of course, the speech from Lorca, talking about this crazy xenophobia that we can definitely draw comparisons to everything that's going on within our country today. Mm-hmm. And the way the show was paced, if we don't talk about from the just the social aspects of it or the political aspects of it, just the way the show was paced is culturally applicable to the way TV is paced today, and the serialized nature of the show, which was something that we talked about a lot in the beginning in chapter 1, and how that was such a departure from all of the other shows, save maybe DS9. All of that screamed, we need to connect with the audience, with today's audience, with an audience from 2018 and beyond. Mm-hmm. And I think they were very, very successful in doing that.
Sure. Very well said, as usual. Rachel, is Star Trek Discovery of its time?
So you say I'm not verbose enough, but everyone already covered all of the salient points.
All I'm saying is that I want to hear what's in your heart, because it's a mystery to me.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, I think it is. I think the through line of multiculturalism being an asset, not a whatever Lorca thinks it is.
Hindrance.
I think he has a good line in there about it being some sort of like a pipe dream or fantasy or something like that.
Yeah, he belittles the Federation's perspective.
Yeah, and I think that having that and also having the cast itself be pretty diverse, mm-hmm. Kind of plays off each other. So you have this sort of refutation of alt-right nut jobs on the internet who hate Discovery because
there are people who aren't alabaster colored that are in it.
I guess so. I don't know.
And I'm a pretty white guy, and I still get annoyed as shit by what those kinds of people say. It's so bad. Lorca is it's too real. It's too real, and I have nightmares. That's all I'll say.
From Lorca.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it did address some issues of our time. Maybe not as some would say directly. Mm-hmm. Others might say as preachily as previous iterations of Star Trek have. I'd almost like to see them, take some more issues on in an allegorical way more directly.
Bring on the accusations of virtue signaling, right? Is that what they're going to say?
I don't think that's what that is.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
I just hear it and I get annoed.
I'll explain it to you later.
I want to hear that podcast.
No, I absolutely agree with you, Rachel. And I think that the only way that can be done is, a good way that can be done is with a slower paced show. I think part of throwing all this stuff in is you lose the time to delve into that kind of stuff, because there's always some action sequence or plot turn or plot twist or that kind of stuff like going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely a theme of the second half of this podcast is you went too fast, people. Slow down.
Impulse power, all right? We don't need to all turn into lizards. It's unnecessary. That's a transport reference, by the way. But yeah, well said. See, I like to hear what's in your brain.
All right.
You don't tell me enough, and I'm left to guess. Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously in general agreement with everybody. I think that Discovery, it was necessary. We needed Star Trek right now, and I'm very glad that there are people who are making this show that recognize the symbolic power that the franchise has, particularly when it comes to representation and to depicting multiculturalism as one of our greatest strengths, as opposed to a hindrance. You could argue that maybe it was a little too direct for Lorca to say, how much of a drag it is on the Terran Empire, but at the same time, too, there's also evil representation in Star Trek Discovery, which I find some value in. You have to. I always have, especially when I was younger, like when I was taking college film classes, for instance, I would hear from some older members, because I was at a community college, so there were people of all age groups in my classes, and I would hear like, oh, we don't need to see that. We don't need to hear that. And my perspective has always been, you need to see what evil looks like in order to know what it is and what kinds of forms it can come into. And it's even better if it's a little hard to detect at first before it reveals itself, and Discovery kind of took that idea, and it wasn't as, I guess, subtle as I would have preferred, but I still find value in the perspective that it did present. And the ability for people to take ownership of a mainstream American television series that don't look like me. I think that that's so important, especially for the future of everything. I have had the ability and the privilege as a white male to look at the vast majority of Star Trek stories as they were told and take immediate ownership because of the relative lack of diversity when compared with what Discovery has done. And I don't find that threatening, and no one should find it threatening, people who look like me. You don't need to find that threatening, because these are characters and it's an idea that everybody can get behind. And that's one of the core reasons why Star Trek has been a franchise that's so important to me. First of all, it's us. I find a significant amount of value in the fact that it is trying to be our future. And they even canonized Elon Musk this season in the Star Trek universe. How about that? But
we'll see. We'll see if he earns
that. Okay, fair enough. But there is so much.
What about Mirror Universe, Elon Musk?
Oh, hey now.
What is he doing? That's what I want to know.
He might have a soul pass.
Instead of like a dummy in the Tesla, it's a real dude that he sent up there. That was his enemy.
Gotcha. Yeah. But no, I mean, that's something that I've always found a significant amount of value in when it comes to all of Star Trek. Whether it wasn't as well realized as it is in Discovery when it comes to that kind of representation, we did start to get there. I mean, even Discovery is not perfect in that respect, but it's certainly closer to the standard that I hope the rest of the show adheres to. And you presented characters to us this season for all of the faults of the narrative over the course of the season and the mechanics of how the plot moved. I found a lot of characters that I can't wait to see what they get up to next. And they come from so many different backgrounds and places and ideas and perspectives. I mean, I found the tete-a-tete between Stamets and Lorca in the early going of the season about, military versus science exploration to be a very compelling theme. And now it looks like we're going to go even further. You have Burnham, who comes from a split household. She lived with a human family and then all of a sudden was uprooted and lived in an alien culture, which she took ownership of later. There's a lot of room there, even before you get to the fact that she has a distinct connection to one of the most iconic characters in the entire franchise. So there is such great potential with this show. It wasn't fully realized in the first season, but when is it ever realized in a first season of a Star Trek show? Because I don't think it ever has, with the possible exception of the original series. But even then, it didn't get quite as crazy as it certainly would. As weird and wonky as the third season of that show is, it did have this weird kind of confidence about it that I have a great deal of respect for. But Discovery is starting out on a hell of a right foot. Even if there were some things that I would have wanted to have changed, even if there were some things that a lot of other Star Trek fans would have wanted to have changed, this is a great way to get us on the ground floor for what's coming next. Let's just hope that they deliver on what comes next. So, we've gone over both chapters. Let's wind this down. I've got 2 final questions for everybody. The first one is, which chapter do you like better between the 2? You have to pick one. And if you had to assign a letter grade to the overall season, what would it be? Zaki, why don't you go first?
Oh boy. It's a hard pick. I'm gonna start with the grade. I'll say a solid B overall.
Okay.
For the season. And I'm going to say the second half. Kind of surprised.
Whoa!
Wow!
Yeah, twist ending.
Wow!
Reverse agony booth. That
I know. Look at that. It's Mirazaki.
Very well.
And the reason I picked the second half is because, given that that's what was the intention from the start, I'm going to pick the thing that actually moves the show towards what they were trying to do versus just sort of laying the pipe.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I picked that.
Very well said. Cicero.
Man, all right. I guess, we've got 2 professors here on the panel right now. I'm going to tell everyone again that if you want the good grades, come over to Professor Holmes. Because I think, again, that this is the best first season of Trek ever. I will give it an A-. Man, it is really tough to pick a favorite half because I feel like the first half was so much fun to discuss and speculate about, and the second half was just a lot of fun to watch. I'm gonna go with the first half just to be different from Zaki.
What puts it over the top?
What puts the first half over the top? I think because the first half was so filled with intrigue and there were so many things to discuss and speculate. I think about obviously coming and talking to you guys about it, and I think about going into work and talking to some of my coworkers that were watching it, and we were able to speculate about what we thought was going to happen, or who this person was, or what this person's motivations were. And that was a lot of fun. There's much more discourse to happen with that type of thing, when you're speculating, than chapter 2, where it was, did you see this thing? Cause that's what chapter 2 was. Chapter 2 was, oh man, did you see that? That was awesome. The end. Can't wait for the next episode. There wasn't a lot of speculatory discourse to happen that happened because of chapter 2. So,
all right, I see. Excellent, Rachel.
I think I've made it pretty clear. I like the first chapter better.
Well, hey, I don't know if you're going to pull a rabbit out of a hat like Zaki just did.
No surprises here. I found it more interesting and engaging, and and the pacing was better.
Okay.
It was closer. Overall, I will give it a B+.
Right. Okay. All right. Very, very solid. Shareef, what do you think?
I'm gonna go with the first half as well. I really love the second half as well. It's really close, but I think going in and finding out more about Michael and Lorca and the crew in the first half, to me, that kind of mystery of what exactly was going on was more impactful than sort of the ride that part 2 gave.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree with Cicero. I think this is the best first season of Star Trek I've ever seen. So I'll give it a solid A.
All right.
It was incredible. As I said before, it's one of the few shows that I watched with my girlfriend, which definitely added to it because we never really watched a Trek before together, which was great.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was just great through and through. And I've been recommending it to like a lot of folks who've been doubting the CBS All Access thing. I'm like, look, just do it, guys. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of this season. I think they accomplished everything they need to do to bring Star Trek back to like relevance as a TV series.
Mm-hmm. Very well said. Well, it looks like you want the good grades, you go to Professor Jackson.
Yeah,
now
apparently.
He's Professor Holmes is going to have to sweeten the pot a little bit.
Right. And he's a real professor. So, so go to him. Go to him. His classes are fun.
As for me, I'm going to say that I probably preferred the second half. Now, when I say that, I'm of two minds about it because I feel like the plot was a little more coherent in chapter 1, but the character work was so overriding and attention grabbing in chapter 2 that I think that's what I favor in this instance.
Okay.
So it's pretty close, but I'm going to go with chapter 2, and I'm going to give it a B+, I think, overall. Now that could change. I mean, it depends on what we see from the show next. But just as a season, I'm in general agreement with everybody when I think that it is probably the best first season of certainly a modern Star Trek. And I also really enjoy the extended universe stuff that we've gotten just out of the Discovery concept. I've enjoyed both books immensely, as we will with the second book, we'll talk about that very soon. But it's really easy to get caught up in this show and the world that it has created within a world I already know so well. So I'm very, very happy to enjoy this first season again. I think I want to watch through it at least one more time, maybe before Westworld starts, but we'll see. And honestly, I'm thrilled that it's in the 23rd century. I didn't think that was something that I was going to like as a relative original series purist. But I do think that there's a fair amount of stuff to explore in the 23rd century on ships that are not named Enterprise, even though we might see a little bit about what the Enterprise was up to early in season 2.
I would hope
hopefully,
so.
Knock on wood. Yeah. Yeah, you and me both. But I mean, it's really easy to get caught up in this world, which is more than I could have asked for. And I'm especially looking forward to seeing new takes on what we could be gleaning from Section 31. That has me excited. So I guess that kind of leads into the very last thing that I'm going to ask you guys about, which is wish lists for season 2. For me, since we got a hint at Section 31, I would not be averse to an entire season oriented around Section 31, particularly if characters from the original series and from the Cage specifically are going to be involved. I think that's a really interesting way to mold the old with the new, or to meld the old with the new. And I would be really into that if you have like Saru and Captain Pike trying to stay one step ahead of this clandestine organization that already has a mirror universe emperor, while also potentially exploring the conflict or relative conflict between Michael and Spock. That sounds really cool. I'm not going to write my own script. I'm willing to go for the ride on what they have waiting for us.
But if they want to pay you to write a script,
Hey, I'm available. Just get in touch with me. But that's probably on my wish list for season 2 is a lot of Section 31 because I like them to an unreasonable degree. But let's go to everybody else. Zaki, do you have any specific wishes for season 2, or do you have a list?
If we can get a bunch of episodes set in the mirror universe where it's just Klingons talking to each other, I'll be friggin' ecstatic. They'll have my number.
Oh my god, that was great.
I'm going to tip your waitress, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm ready to be surprised. I'm very curious about who they cast as Spock, or if it's just like one big tease. I think that would be. I'm curious if that's something that they end up doing. Like, oh, you thought we were going to see Spock, actually, or not? Like, he'll be just around the corner constantly.
Like the Bourne movie, like you mentioned before.
Yeah, right. So I'm very curious about that. But I'm open. I'm ready to discover what they have planned. Thank you very much.
Yes, I salute you, Rachel. Season 2 wish list.
I would like more allegorical episodes with preachy themes of Federation ideals, because my 2018 soul is very open to, it's very susceptible to any optimistic, idealistic fiction.
You like hearing that things are going to be okay tomorrow.
Yeah. That people aren't the worst.
I understand. All right. Well, we can hope. We'll fill the next several months talking about Star Trek. That should help a little bit.
Yeah.
And Action Comics number 1000 comes out in a couple of weeks. So you get a fill of Superman too.
All right.
Which is good. Cicero?
Yes. So my wish list is I want some Harry Mudd. I want some more Harry Mudd.
All right.
Yeah. So let's hope that we get some more of that. Obviously, the stuff with Section 31. I want to see how they introduce that stuff. I hope that Spock is played by Javid Iqbal. So I think that would be highly logical. And much like Zaki, I'm ready for the ride. I really have a lot of confidence in this group. I think that with their confidence in knowing that they've got a second season and they can just go in and tell Star Trek branded stories, whether they're serialized or procedural, the fact that they know they have at least a season and probably 2, hopefully, 2 more to tell Star Trek stories in this universe, will give them the space to create like a full non-abridged vision for a season arc. So I'm looking forward to that.
Very well said. Shareef, close us out. What is your wish list for season 2, if you have one?
Yeah, so my wish list is really to change a lot of the things that I kind of had issues with in season 1, which is mainly get to know more people on the crew. So I feel like, again, they, as I said before, they slow down a bit, then you can really get into some of those like relationships a little more. And I also do want some more, maybe not mirror universe stuff, but as I said in the first part, more about the mycelial network. I really think that it would be awesome if they could push that science/spiritual connection that isn't just like, just like 2 people just like wandering around trying to get out of a coma. Like, I think that they can hit it a little deeper than that and really talk about how the world is connected, the universe is like connected, and really take that wild. I think that they can get a lot of great stories out of that. So yeah, those would be my some of my wishes for season 2.
Excellent. Well, I think that that about covers our full discussion for this. Now, before I sign us off, Shareef, do you have anything you want to tell people about as far as what you're up to, where they can find your stuff and where they can find you.
Yeah. So if you go to shareefjackson.com and you click on the My Projects button, that'll pretty much link you to everything, to my YouTube stuff, my Twitch stuff, All-Acce Podcast, which I co-host with Cicero, my Science Looks Good blog, where I post, different sciencey things, and like all my social media. So you could pretty much hit me up there.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you being able to come on and talk Trek with us. And of course, thanks to our wonderful panel for reconvening after a bit of a break. But I don't think that you're going to be without us for very much longer, because we have some plans in the works. But as of right now, that's going to do it for episode 19 of Discovery Debrief. We hope you've enjoyed the show. And if you did, please like and follow us on our social media channels. And if you would be so kind, we'd also appreciate it if you wrote a review for the show on iTunes or Facebook. It only takes a minute, and we'll be happy to read your review on the air when it's posted. If you have any questions, you can follow the show on Twitter at DSC Debrief, where you can also find all of our individual Twitter handles. And feel free to send us questions through Twitter, our Facebook like page, or by emailing us at hailingfrequencies@discoverydebrief.com. Please be sure to set your courses for this feed for future episodes as we prepare for what comes next. The next episode that we have planned is a review, reaction, and discussion pertaining to the second Discovery tie-in novel, Drastic Measures, by author Dayton Ward. After that, we'd love to know what you would like to hear us talk about, so feel free to get in touch. We've got to fill the time between now and season 2 of Discovery somehow. As always, though, once again, thank you to our panel. Thank you to Shareef for joining us. And as always, until we meet again, please go boldly, my friends.